She stood up slowly, steadier than I expected, clinking her glass with the tip of her fork, eyes gleaming like she was the one being celebrated. She wore the same gold heels she'd once borrowed from me in college and never returned. Her smile stretched wide, too wide. I remember the way she looked straight at me first, like she needed to see the moment my heart cracked. Then she spoke. "I'm pregnant," she said. Then she added, with a glance at my husband across the table. "It's his." The room fell silent. No wine glasses lifted. My aunt paused mid-bite. Daniel didn't even blink. And just like that, the air left the room. 14 years of marriage. 17 years of knowing her. And she chose that night. Our anniversary dinner. A dinner I'd planned down to the ribbon colors. A night meant to mark love and loyalty, turned into a stage for betrayal. But I didn't cry. I didn't gasp. I didn't even shift in my seat. I simply looked at them both, my best friend and my husband, and smiled. That wasn't the moment I broke. That was the moment I confirmed everything I already knew. Because the truth? I've been waiting for this. Watching. Recording. Gathering every piece. I gave them the rope, and they tied the knot themselves. They thought they were the ones with the secret. They thought that night was going to be my undoing. They couldn't have been more wrong. If this is your first time coming across one of our stories, welcome. Please hit the like button and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. We love seeing how far these stories travel. And don't scroll away, because what happened next no one saw coming. The restaurant was candlelit, perched on a rooftop with views of the city I once dreamed of growing old in. Everything sparkled. Champagne on ice. Custom centerpieces made of white peonies and eucalyptus. Daniel knew they were my favorite. I had reserved the entire east wing of the rooftop 2 months in advance. It was supposed to feel intimate, elegant, full of warmth. But the moment I walked in, something tugged at me, quiet and sharp, like a pin pressed into fabric. I brushed it off, smiled through it. Let the soft jazz music wash over the unease creeping up my spine. I'd spent the afternoon getting ready. Light curls pinned just right. A deep green satin dress that skimmed the floor and shimmered when I moved. It was one of the few nights I wanted everything to be perfect. Not for him, but for the version of me that once believed in forever. Jessica was already there when we arrived. She stood near the edge of the balcony, phone in hand, taking selfies. She wore a silk dress, pale rose with a neckline lower than I remembered her ever daring. Her laugh rose above the music, too loud, a little forced. She saw us and waved like this was her party. Then she ran up, arms wide, and hugged me first. "You look stunning, babe, like something out of a magazine," she said. Her perfume lingered after she pulled away, but sweet in a way that made my stomach turn. She turned to Daniel, adjusted the collar of his shirt like she had some right, and smiled. He smiled back, half-second too long. Daniel whispered something in her ear. She laughed, then looked at me quickly, her face neutral again. I watched it happen, right in front of me, and no one else seemed to notice. Or maybe they did and pretended not to. Guests filtered in. My parents, Daniel's brother, my colleagues, Jessica's roommate from college, whose name I always forgot. Toasts began. Wine flowed. I laughed at jokes I didn't hear, nodded at stories I couldn't follow. And all the while, I studied them. The glances, the lingering touches, the subtle way Jessica's hand brushed his as she passed him his glass. How Daniel laughed a little too loud at her stories, leaned in too close when she whispered. It wasn't obvious if you weren't looking. But I was. He didn't sit next to me. He chose the head of the table. Jessica sat to his right. I was on his left, where the waitstaff had placed my name card. We were angled like a triangle, close but always just off enough to avoid suspicion. Their proximity was deliberate, practiced, like they'd spent months learning how not to be obvious, yet forgot I knew them both too well. Jessica offered to make a toast early on. To the couple of the hour, she said. She clinked her glass against Daniel's first before turning to me. 14 years and still in love. You two give the rest of us hope. She smirked, and for a second I saw it. The tiniest flicker of something behind her eyes, superiority wrapped in sugar. Daniel squeezed my hand under the table. The gesture might have seemed romantic to anyone watching, but his grip was too tight, like he was reminding me to behave, or thanking me for playing along. I stared at our joined hands, the same hand that held mine at the altar. The same hand that signed our marriage certificate. The same hand, I now knew, had unlocked hotel doors behind my back. I nodded at Jessica's toast, smiled for the camera, laughed when Daniel whispered in my ear about the wine being too dry. I kept my breathing steady. I leaned in when people spoke. I thanked everyone for coming. But underneath the facade, I was documenting everything, memorizing details, storing moments. The glint in Jessica's necklace. The way Daniel adjusted his watch every time she laughed. The fact that his phone stayed face down the entire night, except when he read a message, and quickly turned it over again. There was no panic in me anymore. No sting. Just observation. I wasn't there to celebrate anymore. I was there to witness. And as the evening stretched on, as the sun dipped behind the skyline and candles burned low, I realized something. They believed they had control. They thought I was in the dark, too naive or too trusting to connect the dots. They believed I had come to honor my marriage, not to bury it. They were wrong on all counts. I met Daniel during my junior year of college. He was tall, charismatic, the kind of man who made every room seem smaller just by walking into it. I remember the first time he looked at me, really looked at me. We were at a campus fundraiser, and he asked if the seat beside me was taken. It wasn't. And from that moment on, neither was I. He had this way of making you feel like you were the only person in the world who mattered. He listened with intensity, complimented without flattery, and laughed like joy came easily to him. Within weeks, we were inseparable. Study dates turned into long walks. Dinner plans turned into late-night conversations about the future. I told myself I had found something rare, something real. And maybe back then, I had. Jessica had already been a permanent fixture in my life by then. She was the first friend I ever made. We were paired together in second grade for a science project, and had been glued at the hip ever since. She knew every version of me. Awkward braces, teenage heartbreaks, college applications, and late-night sob sessions after a bad test. She was family, in every way that mattered. She met Daniel 2 months after we started dating. I introduced them at a local coffee shop near campus. They clicked instantly, too easily maybe, but I didn't think much of it. I wanted the people I loved to get along. Jessica joked that he was too perfect, said he looked like the kind of guy who belonged in a Nicholas Sparks novel. I laughed. Back then, I thought she was being playful. Now I'm not so sure. They got along well. Too well. At first it seemed harmless. She'd tag along on our weekend hikes, offer to plan birthday dinners, text him for help with surprise gifts for me. I told myself I was lucky. That most girls would be thrilled to have a best friend who cared so much about their relationship. The wedding was a year after graduation. Jessica stood beside me in soft blue silk, her hand clutching mine while I recited my vows. She cried when I did, laughed during the toast, and caught my bouquet like she'd waited her whole life to be the one holding it. She hugged me tightly that night and whispered, "You really got your fairy tale." And I believed her. Years passed, and the lines blurred slowly. It wasn't obvious. It never is at first. There was a photo once, one I didn't take. It appeared on Facebook without tagging me. Daniel and Jessica at a bar, standing closer than I would have liked. She had her hand on his chest. The caption was vague. "Old friends, good drinks." I asked him about it. He said it was a coincidence, that they ran into each other, and she asked for a photo to tease me. I laughed it off. Told myself I was being jealous. Then there was the text. It came through on his phone late one night while he was in the shower. I wasn't snooping. The screen lit up and caught my attention. "Miss you already. That thing you do with your hand drives me crazy." No name. Just a heart emoji. When I asked him, he didn't flinch. Said it was a joke. A coworker messing around. Guy talk, nothing serious. He even laughed at how bothered I looked. Told me not to be so sensitive. I wanted to believe him, so I did. Jessica stopped by more often over the years. She'd pop in with wine and stories about her latest disasters. "You're the only people who make me feel sane," she'd say. Daniel would smile and pour her a glass before I could even reach the cabinet. I started noticing little things. How she always found a reason to sit beside him. How her hand would linger on his shoulder during casual touches. How she started calling him D, when I'd only ever heard her use his full name. One night, she came over while I was out with my sister. Said she'd left her scarf behind and Daniel had let her in. When I got home, the scarf was gone. But so was the candle on our coffee table. One I had bought on our honeymoon in Napa. It was small, maybe even meaningless. But I noticed. That's the thing about betrayal. It never announces itself with sirens. It comes quietly, softly, with excuses and distractions and just enough affection to keep you looking the other way. I had begun to question things in my mind, but I never said them aloud, because saying them would have made them real. So I told myself they were close. Nothing more. That Daniel loved me. That Jessica would never. I repeated those sentences like a prayer I needed to believe in. Until one day, they stopped working. Looking back, the signs weren't hidden. I just didn't want to read them. Because once you start connecting the dots, you realize the picture they've been drawing behind your back is nothing like the one you were holding on to. It started with space I couldn't explain. Not physical, not measurable. But I felt it, the kind that creeps in slowly, between words unsaid and touches withdrawn. Conversations with Daniel that used to stretch past midnight became shorter. Sometimes we'd lie in bed and say nothing at all. Not in the peaceful kind of silence married couples slip into with time, but the kind that presses on your chest like an unanswered question. He was distracted. All the time. His phone was never out of reach, always face down, always on vibrate. He'd excuse himself to the garage to take calls that never seemed to end. I once asked who kept calling so late. He said it was work. Deadlines, he muttered. But I knew his voice when he talked to coworkers. This one sounded different, lower, warmer, almost careful. We tried therapy. Or maybe I tried. I found the counselor, scheduled the sessions, begged him to come. For the first few appointments, he showed up. Sat there with his arms crossed, gave short answers, glanced at the clock more than once. When asked what he thought we could work on, he said, "I think we just need space." I asked him to elaborate. He didn't. The therapist asked if there was someone else. Daniel didn't flinch. I wanted to believe him. I really did. But belief without evidence is just hope wearing perfume. And even that was fading. Jessica became more present than ever. She brought over casseroles when I got the flu, offered to drive me to appointments, texted me, just checking in nearly every evening. She was the one who told me to keep trying. "He's just overwhelmed," she'd say. "You two have been through a lot. Don't give up now." There was something in her eyes when she said it. Too polished, too rehearsed. Like she was trying on sympathy like a borrowed coat. She had this habit of stopping by without calling first. "I was just in the neighborhood," she'd explain. Sometimes she brought groceries. Once, a bottle of red wine she claimed she got on sale. She always looked freshly showered. Always wore just enough makeup to look effortless, and there was always a faint, sweet scent on her, something light but noticeable. Not the perfume she used to wear. One night, I found that scent on Daniel's shirt collar. He said it was from an Uber driver who wore too much cologne. I didn't argue. I just added it to the growing list I kept silently in my head. I started waking up before him, and checking his phone. It was always locked. He changed the passcode without telling me. When I asked, he shrugged. Security reasons. He worked in finance, so it wasn't unusual, but he'd never hidden things before. Then came the night I caught him deleting messages. I walked into the room, and he lowered the screen so quickly it was obvious. He said he was clearing storage. I nodded and walked away, but inside something splintered. I didn't say a word. Not because I believed him, but because I needed more than suspicion. I needed proof. He traveled more. Conferences, seminars, networking events. Always one more trip, one more hotel, one more weekend away. He never used to travel this much. And when I asked if I could join him on one of the trips, he hesitated. Said it wouldn't be fun for me. That it was all work. He stopped reaching for me in the dark. Stopped noticing when I wore a new dress or changed my hair. Once I stood in the hallway for 5 minutes after coming home from the salon. He glanced at me, nodded, and went back to his email. I told myself it was a phase. That long marriages had seasons. That maybe he was just stressed, or tired, or growing through something I didn't understand yet. But then Jessica sent me a photo accidentally, she claimed. It was a picture of her with her feet up in a hotel room, wine glass in hand. She captioned it, "Finally some peace and quiet." I looked closely. The artwork on the wall looked familiar. I compared it to a brochure from Daniel's trip the week before. Same hotel chain. Same room layout. When I asked her about it, she laughed. Girl, no. That was from my last trip to Palm Springs. I hadn't mentioned Palm Springs. I hadn't asked where the photo was taken. She filled in the blank before I could. That was the moment the pieces began to shift. Not just float around in confusion, but click into place with horrifying precision. And suddenly, every missed call, every deleted message, every just ran into him, started to feel less like coincidence and more like choreography. A carefully rehearsed dance where I was the only one who didn't know the steps. I wasn't losing him. He had already been taken. The difference was, I wasn't supposed to find out until they were ready. I found it while changing the sheets in the guest room, something I didn't do often, since no one really stayed there anymore. But that morning, I had the urge to clean. Not surface clean, but the kind where you go through closets and drawers hoping, without realizing it, to find something. Anything. The necklace had slipped between the mattress and the bed frame. A delicate gold chain with a small heart-shaped pendant. I knew it wasn't mine. I didn't wear gold, and I'd seen that exact necklace around Jessica's neck more times than I could count. I held it in my hand for a long time. It was warm from where it had been hidden, like it had been left there recently. I turned it over and saw the engraving on the back. Jay always. She had shown it to me years ago when she first got it, said it was a birthday gift from someone she used to date. I asked once who it was from and she laughed and said, just someone who thought I was unforgettable. I set it on the nightstand and stared at it. Jessica hadn't been at the house recently, at least not when I was home. But the room smelled faintly like her. Jasmine and something floral, that same scent I'd noticed on Daniel's collar. It wasn't overpowering, just enough to make the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. When I asked her about it later, her voice caught. Oh my God, she said, I've been looking for that for weeks. Must have fallen off the last time I stayed over, remember? During that storm. I remembered the storm. I also remembered that she didn't stay the night. She had come by to drop off groceries and left an hour later. Daniel had stayed home from work that day because the roads were bad. But I didn't say any of that. I just handed it back to her. Her hand trembled slightly when she took it. She forced a laugh and added, God, I'm always losing things. You know me. Yes, I did. I just didn't know her like this. After that, things sharpened. I started paying attention in ways I never had before. Daniel's business trips started happening more often. Always last minute. Always urgent. Always conveniently timed with Jessica's sudden need for mental health breaks. She once texted me at midnight, saying she was checking into a quiet little spa for the weekend to clear her head, sent a blurry photo of white towels and a fruit tray on a hotel bed. I noticed the date on the image, 3 days old. Her fingernails, freshly done in the photo, were already chipped when I saw her again on Monday. Daniel was out of town that weekend too. Client crisis, he said. Can't be helped. I opened our shared calendar and started tracking his flights. I never told him. Just logged the dates and destinations. Then I asked Jessica casually where she'd been staying. She rattled off different hotels, none of which matched where Daniel had gone. But her stories lacked detail. She stumbled on check-in times, couldn't remember the name of the masseuse who gave her the best deep tissue massage of her life, and kept changing the city when she mentioned where she went for lunch. One night, I called the hotel Daniel claimed to be staying at, asked to be connected to his room. The woman on the phone said there was no guest by that name. I hung up before I could ask any more questions. I started noticing other inconsistencies. Daniel came home once with sand in his shoes, said the client's office was near the beach, but he'd packed sweaters for a trip to Denver. Jessica posted a photo from a rooftop bar the same day. Palm trees in the background. I wasn't looking for clues anymore. I was being handed them. There was a voicemail I wasn't meant to hear. He left his phone on the kitchen counter while he stepped out to take a call. It buzzed once, then again, then went silent. I stared at it knowing I shouldn't, but something pulled me to it. The screen showed a missed call. No name, just the number. Then came the voicemail. Her voice, breathless, whispering, call me when you're alone. I miss you. I hate pretending. I don't know how much longer I can do this. She's going to figure it out. I didn't move. Didn't cry. Didn't scream. Just played it again. She's going to figure it out. She already had. The betrayal wasn't a possibility anymore. It was a fact, and the only thing worse than realizing the man you married had given your life away was knowing he didn't even have the courage to tell you himself. But I wasn't going to confront them. I was going to build my case quietly, thoroughly. Let them think I was still unsure. Let them believe I was in the dark. Because the moment of reckoning wasn't coming from a fight. It was going to come from the silence that followed the truth. There comes a point where suspicion is no longer enough. A point where the ache of uncertainty becomes heavier than the truth itself. I crossed that point one morning in early March. Daniel was in the shower. I was packing his suitcase, something I hadn't done in years but suddenly offered to do. I told him I wanted to feel more involved like a good wife should. He smiled and kissed my forehead. In the side pocket of his carry-on I found 2 receipts. One was from a restaurant in Portland, the kind of place that required reservations weeks in advance. The second was for a spa package. Couples Serenity Escape. Same city. Same day. He had told me he was in Phoenix. That was when I made the call. His name was Robert. Mid-50s. Retired detective turned private investigator. He came recommended by a friend of a friend. Quiet. Professional. He didn't ask for gossip. He asked for facts. I gave him Daniel's travel schedule, Jessica's address, their social media links, and the dates I suspected overlap. He listened without interrupting, took notes without judgment. When I finished talking, he said, "Give me 3 weeks." Took him 11 days. I remember opening the file he delivered, neatly organized, time-stamped, cataloged like a case report. Printed emails, screenshots of texts, GPS logs, photo after photo. Daniel checking into a boutique hotel in Seattle. Jessica arriving 15 minutes later with no luggage. A series of pictures capturing them through a window. Her in his lap, both laughing, a bottle of wine on the table. Later, a shot of them walking out holding hands. They weren't even cautious. Another file showed them in Chicago, his annual sales conference. She arrived the day before he did, under a different name. They used aliases when booking spa services. Mr. and Mrs. Keller. A detail so ridiculous I almost laughed. The texts were worse. Daniel had backed up his phone to our shared cloud account months ago and forgotten. I accessed it. There they were. Hundreds of messages. Jessica. She still has no idea. You're so good at this. Daniel. You're all I think about. Jessica. Imagine her face if she ever found out. Daniel, she won't. I know her. She's soft. Soft. That one word stayed with me longer than any photo. Longer than the messages. Because he wasn't talking about kindness. He meant weakness. Fragility. Someone too gentle to fight back. He didn't know me anymore. I printed every screenshot. Dated every photograph. Annotated every log. Created a binder thick enough to slam shut like a courtroom verdict. I didn't confront him. I didn't alert Jessica. I kissed him goodnight. I answered her texts with hearts and miss you emojis. Let them think I was clueless. Let them believe their performance was airtight. The more lies they told, the quieter I became. I started planning. I opened new accounts in my name. Quietly moved half of our joint funds. Contacted an attorney and drew up separation paperwork with conditions that left nothing to chance. I changed my beneficiaries. Rewrote my will. Assigned power of attorney to my sister. I sold stock under Daniel's name and reinvested it, using permissions he'd once signed without reading. I tracked everything, down to the mile markers on the GPS logs and the timestamps on their weekend meetups. I even gathered witness statements, hotel staff willing to confirm what they saw and when. But I didn't rush. Revenge is sharpest when served with a calm hand. They thought they were in control. They thought they'd built a secret world so cleverly hidden, I'd never find the door. But I had the key, and every lock was about to turn. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to cry. I was going to wait. And the perfect moment came. I need you to breathe. I wasn't ready for that twist either. If your heart just dropped, tap the like button. It tells me I'm not the only one who felt it. And don't keep this story to yourself. Share it with someone who loves real-life drama as much as you do, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Some people scream when they've been betrayed. Others shatter things, plates, windows, their own hearts. I learned to sit still, to let the fire burn inside me without showing smoke. Because silence? It unnerves them more than rage ever could. After the investigator's final report, I stopped being the wife who waited for the truth. I became the woman who orchestrated it. First came the legal cleanup. I rewrote my will. Every clause. Every allocation. Daniel was removed as executor and beneficiary. Jessica's name was nowhere to be found. My assets were redirected to trusts, controlled by my sister and goddaughter. Quietly. Legally. Fully enforceable. Then I closed our joint accounts. Slowly. A little here, a little there. I didn't drain them outright. That would have set off alarms. I let the balances dwindle under the guise of home repairs, gifts, charitable donations. Things he never questioned. The house. I refinanced it into my name only, using a loophole in a form Daniel had signed 2 years ago when we were discussing estate simplification. He never read it. Just smiled and said, "You're the organized one, babe." So I organized everything, right out from under him. Stocks. Bonds. Retirement savings. I restructured them under a holding company I created in my maiden name. A ghost company with no signage, no employees but ironclad protections. It took weeks, but every piece fell into place. Then I planned the dinner. Our 14th anniversary was approaching. I knew what they'd expect. Another forced dinner, polite clinks of wine glasses, and a tired toast. But I wasn't giving them that. I was giving them an audience. I sent invitations, real, printed, embossed in gold. I spared no expense. To Daniel's family I wrote, "Join us for a celebration of love and resilience. 14 years of partnership. Your presence would mean the world. To mine. Come witness something unforgettable. To mutual friends. We're celebrating our journey, our challenges and our triumphs. Let's toast to the years behind us, and what lies ahead." I even invited Jessica. I made sure her invitation arrived on a day she knew Daniel was away for work. I wanted her to feel special. Chosen. I wanted her to think I had no clue what she really was. She RSVP'd the same evening. I booked the private room at the restaurant Daniel loved. The one where he proposed to me. The same table. The same pianist. I had the florist recreate my wedding bouquet as centerpieces. Every detail dripped with symbolism. A perfect mirror of the beginning, before I shattered it with the end. I wore the dress Daniel had begged me to buy, but never once complimented when I did. I curled my hair the way Jessica always said made me look too soft, and I made sure to seat them side by side. Me at the head of the table. I smiled as guests trickled in. I hugged Daniel's mother who whispered, "You look radiant." I greeted my brother who asked, "What's this really about?" I just kissed his cheek and said, "Stay till dessert." I passed Jessica a glass of champagne and said, "I'm so glad you're here." Truly. She blinked, unsure. Daniel laughed nervously and said, "You two have always been my favorite girls." I laughed too, because now so many were watching, and they had no idea what they were about to witness. I didn't want a scene. I wanted a performance. With lighting. With music. With every person who ever loved us seated in perfect rows. Because betrayal should never be buried in whispers. It should be unveiled like a masterpiece. One brushstroke of truth at a time. And the first stroke was coming. Right after the toast. The candles flickered. The pianist played softly in the background. Some haunting melody that had once meant something tender to me. Now it just felt like the overture to a long-awaited finale. I sat at the head of the table, my glass untouched, watching them. Jessica was radiant in her delusion. Daniel, polished in pretense. Their laughter too loud. Their smiles too rehearsed. The table buzzed with conversations about memories, anniversaries past, how fast time had flown. And just as the waiter brought out dessert, a delicate chocolate souffle that Daniel used to beg me to make at home, Jessica cleared her throat. Her voice sliced through the room like a violin string snapping. "I think this is the perfect time," she said, with a little gleam in her eye. "Daniel and I have some exciting news." I turned my head slowly, folding my hands on my lap. Her fingers slid gently across Daniel's wrist as she smiled, no smirked, and said, "I'm pregnant." Gasps. A clatter of silverware. One of Daniel's cousins choked on her wine. And in the silence that followed, Jessica looked at me, expecting collapse. Daniel looked too, with a practiced expression of guilt and explanation. But I didn't flinch. I lifted my glass, and I smiled. To endings. I began, my voice calm, ringing clear across the room. To new beginnings. And to the gift of finally seeing people for who they truly are. Eyes widened. Whispers rippled. Jessica's smile faltered just a little. I stood slowly, pulling a sleek cream envelope from beneath my chair. Since tonight is such a celebration, I continued, I thought it best to give you both something in return. A gift of clarity. I handed the envelope to Daniel. His hands trembled. Inside, copies of bank statements, asset transfers, the deed to our home, a copy of the newly signed will, a photo of him and Jessica, taken by the private investigator, in a hotel parking lot. Time-stamped. Daniel's face lost all color. Jessica leaned over to see, her expression shifting from smug to stunned. This isn't possible, she whispered. But it was. Every page. Every signature. Every timestamp. I didn't confront you before because I didn't need a confrontation, I said, now walking slowly behind them. I needed a conclusion. And I needed everyone you fooled to witness it. The room fell into a heavy silence. Even the pianist had stopped playing. Daniel, I continued, now facing him. As of this morning, you no longer have access to any joint funds. The house is no longer yours. Your name has been removed from everything. You'll receive paperwork from my lawyer Monday morning. You might want to look into affordable housing. I turned to Jessica. I hope the baby brings you more loyalty than you gave me. Because raising a child while living off a man with nothing left will be character building. She blinked rapidly, her hand clenching her napkin like it might stop her world from spinning. And to everyone else, I said, turning to our stunned guests, thank you. For being here. For seeing the truth not just through words, but through silence, patience, and proof. I placed my glass gently back on the table, the toast unfinished, but the message crystal clear, and then I walked out. Not in anger, not in pain, but with grace so sharp it could cut diamonds. Because that was never my breakdown. It was their reckoning. And I wanted them to sit in it, surrounded by everyone who used to believe in them. My footsteps echoed down the marble corridor of that restaurant like a slow drumbeat of freedom. Outside, the air felt lighter. The stars looked clearer. I didn't look back. Some people burn bridges. I paved mine in stone, walked across it in heels, and let them drown in the river they thought I'd never cross. I hadn't planned to say more after the toast, but silence has its limits. And some truths deserve their own spotlight. So I turned around. I walked back into the room. This time, not as a wife or a friend, but as a storm dressed in silk and certainty. Before dessert ruins anyone's appetite, I said, clapping my hands softly, I have one more thing to share. The lights dimmed, and on the screen behind me, the projector flickered to life. I had arranged it days earlier. Paid extra for discretion. Slide 1 Jessica. Checking into the Halston Suites, smiling into her phone. Slide 2 Daniel. Same hotel. Entering an hour later. You could have heard a pin drop between gasps and muffled cries. Aunt Lillian dropped her fork. Daniel's cousin muttered, no way. Jessica turned white. Daniel froze mid-breath. This is from 6 months ago, I said, my voice even. But it started long before that. More slides. Photos from 3 different cities. Hotel lobbies. Parked cars. A beach resort during one of Jessica's supposed wellness retreats. I looked toward Daniel's mother. She asked me 2 months ago if you two were growing apart. I lied to her. To protect your reputation. To protect your son. I turned to Jessica's father. You walked me down the aisle. Told me I'd always be your daughter. Did you know your daughter was lying in my bed while I was away for cancer screening last year? His mouth parted, eyes glistening. I knew months ago, I continued. And I waited. Not because I was weak, but because I wanted the truth to scream louder than my pain ever could. I stepped forward. The house? Fully mine. Daniel signed it over when he thought it was for a business deal. Thank you for not reading the fine print. A sharp intake of breath from Daniel. The joint accounts? Closed and emptied 3 weeks ago. The shares I gifted you for your birthday, Daniel? Sold. Quietly. Profitably. I used the funds to start a scholarship in my late father's name. He always hoped I'd do something meaningful with pain. More gasps. Murmurs rippling across the room like aftershocks. And just so we're all on the same page, the will? Completely updated. You're not in it. Daniel tried to speak, but I raised a hand. And Jessica? That baby you're carrying isn't the only baby at this table. Eyes darted. Heads turned. Jessica blinked rapidly, trying to decipher my meaning. I'm pregnant too, I said softly, but mine is a child conceived in love, not deceit. From a man who sees me, hears me, respects me. I let the words hang. Jessica's lip quivered. Daniel looked like he'd swallowed gravel. My mother gasped and grabbed my hand with trembling pride. You see, I continued, this isn't just about betrayal. It's about evolution. You two thought you were the storm, but I was the quiet before it. I turned back toward the projector and shut it off. The screen went black, but the truth lingered, etched on every face in that room. I didn't just walk away from your lies, I said with finality. I built something stronger from the rubble, and I wanted everyone here to see it with their own eyes. Because hiding truth makes it toxic, but exposing it? That's how you clean the wound. I picked up my clutch, straightened my dress, and walked toward the exit for the last time that night. Just the echo of freedom tapping against marble floors, and a room full of people who would never again confuse silence for submission. The dinner ended in silence, at least for me. For everyone else, it was chaos. Daniel chased after me into the hallway, his voice cracking like thin ice. Please, I didn't mean for it to happen this way. I didn't turn around. Not yet. I wanted him to feel the void between us. He kept going. You meant something to me. You still do. I was confused. Jessica, she was just convenient, I said, finally turning to face him. Accessible? Familiar? You chose her because you thought I'd never suspect. And you were right, until I stopped protecting your comfort. His lips trembled. He reached for my arm. I stepped back. You didn't just cheat on me, Daniel, I said. You replaced me while I was still breathing beside you. Then you watched me sink, thinking I'd never learn how to swim without you. Behind him, the restaurant doors burst open. Jessica stumbled out, tears streaking her makeup, heels in hand. She saw us and stopped, waiting, like this was a game where I'd fold and walk away. She miscalculated. I was your friend, I said to her, voice low and firm. I held your hand through 2 breakups. I covered for you when you crashed your father's car. I gave you a bed when you ran from your mistakes. Her mouth opened. Nothing came out. You didn't just sleep with my husband. You tore through the roots of everything I believed about loyalty. And you smiled through it. She whispered something about being sorry. I didn't care. Because her sorrow wasn't guilt. It was exposure. Aunt Lillian stormed past us. You disgust me, she spat at Jessica. Cousin Ray handed me an envelope. Inside were the signed divorce documents. I'd arranged it ahead of time, waiting for this exact night. Daniel blinked at the papers like they were written in fire. You already. I did everything, I said, before you even realized I wasn't crying anymore. The attorney I'd hired stood nearby, briefcase in hand, ready to file first thing the next morning. No split assets. The prenup Daniel had insisted on when I was a broke college girl? Ironically, it saved me. He had no claim on what I built. And now he was the one left scrambling. Jessica's parents approached. Her mother couldn't even look at her. Her father muttered something about disgrace, about trust, about raising her better than this. Jessica collapsed into a chair outside the restaurant, ignored by the same people she tried to impress. Meanwhile, my people, my real family, formed a wall around me. My cousin slid her arm through mine. My brother-in-law drove up to the curb without a word, opening the back seat door. I turned to Daniel one last time. You broke something, Daniel. But it wasn't me. It was your own reflection. And now you'll have to live with the pieces. He didn't move. Just stood there, holding the air like it could anchor him. I walked away. Head high. Shoulders squared. The night air was cool on my skin, but inside, I burned with something stronger than anger. Liberation. That evening, I didn't just reclaim my voice. I reclaimed my power. And for the first time in years, I felt light. Not because the betrayal didn't hurt, but because I survived it without becoming what hurt me. A year can change everything if you let it. I live in a sunlit house now. It's smaller, quieter, but it breathes peace. There's a garden out back that my daughter and I tend together. Tomatoes, basil, hibiscus. She loves the butterflies that hover near the blossoms. I love that she laughs again. Fully. Loudly. Like nothing ever broke her home in two. I work for a nonprofit now. Position I never would have considered before. The hours are long, but the work feels honest. Purposeful. Every paycheck reminds me that I can build something from the ground up. Again. And again. And again if I have to. Daniel reached out. Of course he did. 3 times. The first was an email titled, "Can we talk?" The second, a bouquet of white lilies at my office with a note, "Still yours if you want me." The third, a voicemail. Slurred words. Regret dripping like old wine. I was stupid. I messed up. I see that now. I didn't respond to any of them, not because I hate him, but because silence in the right hands speaks louder than revenge. Jessica had the baby. A girl. She named her Hope. Ironic, considering she delivered alone. No Daniel in the waiting room. No family beside her. Her mother stopped speaking to her after that dinner. Her father cut her off financially. She works 2 jobs now, one at a cafe, another at a dry cleaner. I've walked past her twice on Main Street. She doesn't make eye contact, and I don't gloat. I don't need to. That's the beauty of letting karma do what it does best. It's slow, unassuming, precise. Meanwhile, I sleep better than I have in years. I host dinner parties, real ones now, without lies baked into the appetizers. I've started painting again. Nothing serious. Just me, a canvas, and messy joy. The man in my life? Kind. Steady. Not threatened by my strength. He doesn't interrupt when I speak. He listens even when I'm silent. And when he holds my hand in public, he does it with both confidence and care. Like someone proud to be by my side, not ashamed to be seen. My daughter notices. She says, "Mommy, you smile more now." I do, because for the first time in a long time, my life is mine. And that was how I took back my power, without screaming, without begging, without chasing closure. Sometimes the loudest form of revenge is living beautifully. If this ending gave you chills, or left you a little speechless, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Turn on the notification bell because the next story, let's just say, the betrayal runs deeper, the twist hits harder, and the revenge, colder. And hey, drop a comment below. Tell me what part made your jaw drop. I read every single one. See you in the next video.